Hey, we are live. Excuse me. It has been a wild and tumultuous couple of weeks. It's been crazy, actually. Let me get a couple things finished up here and we will be good to go. I think we're actually probably good to go now. Okay. Yep. Click, 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 click. Boom. I think we're good. Throw a test in here. Yep, perfect. And awesome. All right, yeah. So, give me a couple seconds to close out some of these extra windows too. We're going to do something a little bit different today, and we're going to try to do this on Fridays in general. We're going to have a rules discussion. Um, Boop, but I need to make sure we're all set. I think we're all set. Just kind of letting some people know we're live, as you can see. And giving, first of all, yeah. Let's give a big bam. There we go. Let's do a big fat happy Veterans Day to all the veterans out there. Uh, let's start with that. You know, all the veterans out there, if you're watching this or if you do see this, happy Veterans Day. I'm a veteran. Typically, I would spend my Veterans Day getting my obligatory meal and then running up like a $50 beer tab. But that's not what we're doing today. I no longer live around my old core group of veterans, so I don't have that luxury. And obviously, like my little brother, he and I used to do things for Veterans Day, and we're not really doing much this year. So I figured I'd do a stream. Fridays, we're going to work on this type of stuff. We're going to do some kind of like a rules discussion or just a general discussion rather than a hobby hangout. And we're going to talk about some things that I think are weird or that I think are neat or whatever, however you want to look at it. Let's pull up Nephilim. And I'm definitely not pulling this up on a third-party website. And now I actually, because of that being up, I actually need to come out and say that everything I do in this stream is not affiliated with Games Workshop in any way. Yes, I am an employee. No, I am not promoting them because they are paying me. I am totally unaffiliated when I do my streams and my YouTube videos. And that is a thing that I do kind of have to say occasionally when I do stupid stuff like this. Like you can see my timesheet and stuff, and I'm like, oh no. All right, cool. So the first thing I want to talk about admech. Let's pull up some stats on admech. So let's go to the Goonhammer 40k stats. And for those that don't know, for the last week while I'm pulling this up, I've been riding the struggle bus. Actually, last 2 or 3 weeks. I had my boy came out of surgery, and then he had to go right back into surgery, and then he stayed in the hospital for a couple extra weeks. So we had to I went to Cleveland to spend time with him there, and then he came home. We had a birthday party and a little celebration because he's officially 100% cancer free. So he's approved for his DFMO trial. And then my daughter got the flu or COVID, but she tested negative for COVID, but all it felt like COVID. And then it hit me and I got it. And it feels like it felt like COVID, but it was a negative test. And I understand you can have false negatives and stuff, but for both of us to have a negative test, it just was like, all right. Um, If it was COVID, I'm super glad I got the vaccine because it just felt like having COVID. So it really made a big difference. And no, I'm not taking a political or opinionated stance on this. I'm just saying, as a person who got the vaccine, it's a little disappointing to have gotten COVID and it felt like every other time I got COVID. If it was COVID, it could have just been flu. Uh, but yeah, so that's where I've been for the last couple weeks, plus wrapping up some last minute stuff for Games Workshop, getting their terrain put together and built so we could ship it out. All the boxes went out yesterday, so I'm pretty pumped about that. I think I'm basically off for a week. I don't know if I'm going to New Mexico now or not, but we'll kind of get into that later. All right, so 40k stats. For those that don't know, 40kstats.goonhammer.com has a lot of things you can track. So let's do. We want faction statistics, and we want to look at Adeptus Mechanicus. All right, and they have a 38% win rate right now. You can't see that because my big fat head is in the way. Let me throw it up there. So they have a 38% win rate right now. Okay. They've got 32 ties, 874 losses, and this is real win rate. Okay, so that's cool. So their real win rate and the regular win rate doesn't really change. So this is just for Nephilim, I think, is what this accounts as. Might be since the beginning of the year. But we're going to go to sub-faction breakdown now, okay? So here's Adeptus Mechanicus. We've got, in the sub-faction breakdown, I just had it and I scrolled off of it and now my brain's not working. We've got 1,000 games here we're looking at, all right? Agrippina has a 40% win rate. Custom has a 35% win rate. Greya has a 0% win rate, but they only have 4 games, so you really, that doesn't, like, that was one person went to one event and lost every game is all that is. Lucius has a 41.25% win rate. Mars has a 37.5% win rate. Riza has a 20% win rate, and so on. Like, you can all see. I can zoom it in if you need me to, but I'm pretty sure everybody can see. Let me, yeah, you should be able to see that. So, what's going on here? Are they really that bad? Or what? You know? And so it's interesting because long answer and short answer, kind of the same. It's just they are kind of bad right now, but it's not even that they're bad. Hey, what's up, my man? It's not even that they're terrible. Like they're not a terrible army. Um, they have good interactions, but they've definitely been overshadowed by a lot of the things that have come out since them. And rules like Armor of Contempt really hurt them because a lot of their stuff is at that neg 1 AP. So like all their troop weapons that have rend are at rend 1, you know, so they're not going to fare super great into any kind of power armor army. Now I also am looking at this right here, Riza, because this to me is the one that stood out as this is a really good faction. But they don't have a lot of representation, and their 20% win rate is kind of weird because they've got what 30 games out of 1,000. I don't know what that percentage is off the top of my head, and I don't feel like doing maths. So we're going to get out the calculator. Uh, 3%, roughly 3%. So roughly 3% of the games are represented by this faction. So that tells me that like probably a lot of the people that are playing Riza are just like the lore guys. Maybe not. But when I was reading through this codex, That was the one that stood out to me as holy smokes, like there's a lot of potential here for some powerful stuff. Uh, I think competitively, the biggest thing that admech suffer from is they have really cool secondaries. And here's what I mean by that. All right. So we're going to go over here to Nephilim. And again, I am definitely not on a third party website. Uh, we're going to go to the secondaries. Secondary objectives. We're going to unselect all these. We're going to select that. All right. And here's what I mean by they have really cool secondaries. The accretion of knowledge. At the end of the battle, score 3 victory points for each enemy model that is destroyed that meets one or more of the following criteria. It has a warlord trait, it has a relic, it has a vehicle keyword with 14 wounds or more. So this is super situational, but very flavorful. You know, if you're going into, like, let's say you're going into an orc army, and they've got 2 characters with a warlord trait and relic, and then they've got like 3 kill rigs. So you can get 3, 6, 9. You can cap it if you kill it all, right? But then let's say you're going into a Space Marine player, and they just have like 2 characters or 3 characters with a warlord trait and relic, and that's it, and they don't meet any of the other criteria, then you're getting 9 at best. You know, so it's one of those where it's very situational. Uh, it can be very good. It would actually be good into knights also if you can kill them. I don't know how good admech is at killing knights. I haven't played against admech in a while, and I've only played with them on the table once, and that was in 8th edition. When I first got back into 40k at the start of 8th, this was one of the armies I looked at, mostly because I love the aesthetic of the Castellan robots. I'm a big Fallout fan, so those things looking like just big sexy protectrons was just like, I want this in my life. But then I saw the stupid orc buggies and, just immediately went right back into orcs like a clown. But yeah, so it's a cool secondary. It's very flavorful. It's not an auto take. It's very situational. Eradication of flesh. You score 3 victory points if more enemy units were destroyed by admech vehicle units from your army this battle round than the number of admech vehicle units that were destroyed. It's just shittier grind, and I hate to say it like that, but it really is. Um, because it has all these vehicle triggers. Because they have these vehicle triggers, it can make it a little harder. You can probably build your list to kind of tailor around that, but grind is that's a dicey, in my opinion, kind of secondary to take anyway. There's only a handful of armies that can grind, and if your opponent knows you're going to grind and your opponent can, if they can ramp their points early, they can just send wave after wave at you to try to just get you to kill everything all at once. So these are things to consider. They don't have any warp ritual ones. Uncharted sequencing, and I don't like that they have 2 in the same category, but some armies do. Uncharted sequencing, if you select this objective during the resolve pre-battle ability step of the mission, assign 1 objective marker. Oh, okay. So this one, and I'm not going to read it word for word, we're just going to break it down. Basically, at the beginning of the game, you assign a number to each objective marker on the table, and then if you control that objective at the end of the battle round, then you get 3 points. So, like, if the one in your deployment zone is number 1, then turn 1, as long as you control it at the end of the battle round, you get 3 points. And you do have to kind of like assign them pre-game. So I would suggest you. I don't know if you have to tell your opponent. It doesn't really matter. I mean, it can, but I'd have to do some research into that one. Um, It's noted on your army roster, so I would say that it's probably information your opponent can have access to at any point because they can ask for a copy of your army roster and they can look at it at any time. So really, the easiest way to do that is to just get some numbered tokens and put them next to the objective markers. Interestingly, so this one is better if you go second, and arguably this could help you have a better go second win rate. Simply because, man, all you got to do is make sure you're on that objective, and then your enemy doesn't have the opportunity to kill you off of it. So it's really interesting. And again, I like it. I think it's cool. I think it requires a lot of forethought and planning. And it basically means you have to kind of have a plan going into the game about what it is you want to do and how you want to do it. And those are the interactions I really like. You know, I do play orcs, and I know there's like a big joke that orcs are just a big bunch of big dumb dummy heads, but I do kind of prefer a bit more of a cerebral game. Like I do like to think when I play this game. Hidden Archaeo Vault. If you select this a mission or objective during the All right, I'm going to read this one. If you select this objective during the resolve pre-battle ability step of the mission, your opponent selects one objective marker on the battlefield not within their deployment zone to be the hidden Archaeo Vault objective marker. At the end of the battle round, you score 4 victory points if you control it. Right? Yep, if you control it. So this is another one that's like, I mean, it's not that much different from Uncharted sequencing. It's a lot more like the Shrine, which is the Sisters one, except the Sisters one scores at the end of your turn, whereas this one's at the end of the battle round. So again, this is going to be a better one if you end up going second. Um, there's a few missions where this could be good on. Abandoned Sanctuaries is one because there's only 3 objectives in the middle of the board, and they're not going to pick the one in your deployment zone, obviously. But you can stack into that one objective then. Like if your opponent's just like, all right, I'm picking the middle of the board. Cool, man. We'll just fight in the middle of the board, and that's fine. Um, so one thing you can do is pick that to try to dictate the flow of the game. You might not get it every turn, but even if you get it 3 turns, that's 12 points. And again, for an army that's suffering to score, I don't know if we can get average scores on this. I don't know. Let's see if we can Google that real quick. Army average score 40k. Well, let's check out this one. This is a little bit different, but I don't know if we can get scores here. Last 6 months. All right, so points. Actually, while we're here, and again, this is also going to be a big part of why certain armies are struggling. When you've got, and this is a European thing, tabletop tournaments, but this info is probably pretty accurate across Europe and the United States. I'd be curious to see what people are taking to average 92.24 points on Yanari, because they're not averaging that here. But admech 75, yeah, I don't know. Interesting. Yeah, 75, and this is obviously adding in paint, so 60. But I don't know if this is an average. I'd have to do a little bit more digging on that one. But anyway, even if they're averaging 60 to 65 points, which is probably reasonable, when you've got armies that are scoring in the 190s consistently, like that's also just going to affect everything else. But you've got these cool secondaries, right? and they're not auto takes. You're not capping them every game. Um, so it inhibits your ability to score. If we assume that you can get 12 points on the Archaeo Vault, or I don't know that you can get 12 points on Uncharted sequencing. That one's too iffy for me. Like, I would take the Archaeo Vault over sequencing most games, unless you have a lot. Like, if you have a 6 objective table, like a Data Scry Salvage or something, I might actually take Uncharted sequencing. Um, just because I have extra. Well, I guess I don't have extra opportunities, but I have some leeway there. Whereas like Abandoned Sanctuaries, you just have 5 objectives. So there's no way to kind of like bamboozle anybody. All right. So that is going to be their biggest struggle is they don't have anything. Secondary disparity is my least favorite thing about 40k currently, especially because some of the cool and fluffy and bad, while others. Yeah, and that's exactly what we're talking about, my man. You got it. You hit the nail on the head. Um, And I think that's a big part of why admech is struggling, not because the army is that bad, but they're just struggling to score points. And that's actually what I wanted to kind of talk about is what can we do if we are going to play admech? How can we kind of work with admech to try to get the most out of our army if we're going to try to play them competitively, right? I think you and I had that talk about Marines. Hey, what can we do with Marines? And we talked about the White Scars. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about admech because this is an army that is struggling right now. They're a sub 40% win rate overall. As I was just kind of going over right here. Scrolling is hard, man. There we go. Yeah. 38% win rate. With Lucius leading the pack at 41 and a quarter. But I think there's a lot of play in this army, and I think there's a few things that hold players back. The first thing is that when you think of admech, most people think of them as a shooting army, right? So I think that holds people back. Yep, I agree. Ninth does reward mobility. There's a few exceptions to that. Obviously, like Death Guard isn't necessarily dominating tournaments, but they're resilient enough that their lack of mobility isn't as detrimental as some of the other ones. And yeah, admech. So admech's got a lot of strong units, um, and a lot of strong killing power. I do think that, like I said, like Armor of Contempt kind of changes your army composition, but at the end of the day, like they still have some really solid units, you know. Um, and that's so. Let's take a look at this. We're gonna look at the Forge Worlds first. All right. So when we look at Mars, this is like when I think of admech, I think of Mars and I think of Lucius because like in ninth ed, that's all everybody played. In eighth ed, it was a lot of Mars. Um, I'm actually kicking around, so we keep talking about like maybe I'll build a Marine army, maybe I'll do this, and I keep kicking around what it is I'm going to start building in 2023. And man, I keep kind of like steering back towards admech. Again, just love the stupid Castellans. I just think they're so cool looking. Um, So the dogma for Mars, Skatara units with this gain the Canticles of the Omnissiah ability, and then each time you shoot or fight, you can reroll one hit roll when resolving the attack. So the rerolling a hit roll is actually a solid army bonus. Um, it's not bad. It's basically like a free CP reroll every time you shoot or fight. So it's not a terrible thing to have. The Canticles of the Omnissiah ability is pretty good. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and like I said, for me, as a big Fallout fan, which also just has that, especially third Fallout 3 and later when Bethesda took it over, like they really leaned into that 50s Americana and science fiction vibe, and the Protectrons really have that kind of like 50s sci-fi feel to them. So when I saw that Castellans, like I said, were just big, sexy Protectrons, I was just like, this is it. This is what I'm doing. Um, But yeah, so they get the canticles. And these are your turn-based bonuses, or at least some of them, because they have two different turn-based bonuses depending on what unit it is. Like if it's a dogma, I think is the keyword, a dogma unit, they get something else, and then the canticles units get this. So this basically gives canticles to your whole army. The canticles are really good. They are really good. Um, So this is why I think you see Mars a lot, is because everything just gets much more efficient, much more resilient. You got a lot of bonuses on the table, and that's the other thing about admech, is especially now with the flyers getting kind of reined in, and some of the strats and mortal wounds getting capped. You have a lot of interactions going on, and it's a lot to keep track of, and you actually have to kind of think about what you're doing. They're a very character kind of hungry army. So if and I think that's arguably one of the reasons they also kind of suffer competitively, is that, you know, it's kind of like playing Craft Worlds. Like there's a lot of interactions. They reward good play, but they also punish you if you play poorly. So it's just like a similar interaction. Like if you buff the wrong units because you've got so many things going on, you're going to lose a lot of efficiency that you would have normally had. Their warlord trait, not super interested in that right now, or the strat. Actually, the strat might be relevant. Mars selected shoot. Each time model. Okay, so a wound roll of 6 does a mortal wound in addition to. So okay, pretty standard, and I think that's pretty much what it was in 8th Ed. Lucius is the one I do see a lot, just because a couple of my buddies that have admech, they played Lucius. Each time an attack with a damage characteristic of 1 is allocated to a model with this dogma, add 1 to any armor saving throw made against that attack. That one's really good. That one's really good. And then add 3 inches to the range characteristic of ranged weapons models are equipped with, and that's pretty solid. But the bonus to the and thank you for the follow, the Jaeger. I don't know how you pronounce that, but I did see that. I appreciate the follow, my man. That's really good. I do like that interaction. You know, your Castellans have a 3-up save, but against damage 1, they'll have a 2-up save. You can give them light cover with, I believe, one of the Canticles, and then if they're in the Aegis protocol, they just have a 2-up base save. So, like, you could literally have those things sitting on a 0-up save against ranged attacks. Uh, it's kind of funny. And that might be why, though, you're seeing them do better than the others, is because they're a little bit harder to shift. Um, and then they just have a jump strat, if I remember right. Oh, it's a deep strike strat. Okay. Agrippina. Each time a model with this dogma makes a ranged weapon attack. Okay, so you get an additional AP within half range. And then anytime an enemy unit declares a charge against a unit with this dogma, if it is not within engagement range, it can hold steady or set to defend. So basically, your whole army either gets to overwatch on 5s or add 1 to their hit rolls in the subsequent fight phase. That's not bad. I understand why it's probably not. Where's Agrippina over here? That was actually the second highest. And I have to assume it's more the armor pen. Getting within half range and being able to ignore Armor of Contempt is going to be very useful for an army that has a lot of neg 1 AP on like their base guns. And then select one Cataphront Servitors unit from your army, add 1 to the, oh my gosh, okay, yeah, that's them. So you can take a unit of Breachers or a unit of Destroyers or 1 of each or whatever, because you can do 2 in a Strike Force battle, and then you can increase their toughness by 1. So those things go to T6, and those things are good. I love the Breachers and the Destroyers. I think they're just really cool looking models. and they have a really solid data sheet to go along with that. And then Greya, you ignore combat attrition, period. So if you fail morale, you just lose 1 and that's it. And then a 5-up against mortal wounds. So 5-up against mortal wounds is weird. I don't. There should not be so many mortal wounds in this game that half your army bonus is a 5-up against mortal wounds. That's just kind of my opinion on it. Like if we have armies whose whole shtick is I get a 5+ feel no pain against mortal wounds, then arguably we just have too many mortal wounds in the game at the time, and they just need toned down, because rarely am I going to want to play an army that their whole shtick is look at me, I get a 5-up against mortals. Now, obviously, a lot of armies that's not the only thing they do. Valorous Heart has a lot. I'm trying to remember what all they do, but it's like they get you can't reroll wounds against them. They get a 5-up against mortal wounds, and I think there's something else that they do. And the rerolling wounds changed because of Armor of Contempt. So obviously, like, their whole shtick is they're not dying. And then Death Skulls, you get to reroll a hit or a wound every time you shoot or fight, and then you get 5-up against mortals, and then all of your infantry have OBSEC. So that's actually why I play Death Skulls. I don't play it for the feel no pain against mortals. I play it because all my infantry get OBSEC. So like my War Boss has OBSEC, my Knobs and my Mega Knobs have OBSEC. So that's where that comes from. I do I appreciate having the 5-up against mortals? Sure, but would I have rather had the 6-up invuln that they had in 8th edition? Yeah. So it's one of those where, like I said, like, in my opinion, if your army bonus is dedicated to 5-ups against mortals, probably need to just tone the mortal wounds down in the game. Let's see, and then they've got a automatic deny on a 4-up as their strat, and then Stygies. What do we got? Each time a ranged attack targets a vehicle unit. Okay, so you get dense cover at 18 inches or more. Lucius, Relic, and Traitor pretty solid. Transhuman is yes. The transhuman is good. And again, like I said, like, my buddy he plays them, one of them specifically. So yeah, no, Lucius has got a lot of play. I've dealt with him a few times. My it's one of those where, man, like, my solution to every problem is always just bring a bucket of dice. So when he started bringing those, and he had like a brick of Castellans, because you can make the Castellans core with the what you call it, Data Smith. So if you can make the Castellan's core with the Data Smith, he can give them transhuman, he can give them light cover, he can give them all these things. So then it just became, okay, well, here's just 60 berserkers, buddy, and you just can't make them all, and that's what we're doing. So it's one of those where we have a pretty interesting interaction. But no, it is good. I've seen Lucius on the table more than any other, just because of having friends that play it. Um, but we're going to jump down to Metallica, because we're going to end on the Forge world that stood out to me the most. And part of that's because of just how I play the game. Models with this dogma do not suffer the penalty to hit rolls incurred for firing assault weapons in the same turn that unit is advanced. That's okay. And they don't suffer the penalty for moving and shooting heavy weapons. And then, while an enemy is within engagement range of a unit, that enemy unit is treated as being below half strength. So Metallica is weird. Sorry, I'm still kind of getting over whatever it is I've had for the last few days. Metallica is weird. It definitely tells me you're bringing a lot of infantry to take advantage of these army bonuses. You want to have, like, a lot of rangers and stuff like that have their heavy weapons. And then, they're going to be okay into armies that actually have to interact with the leadership, which is not, it's probably half of them. Like I'm trying to think. So orcs, real bad in the leadership phase, like real bad. Eldar are kind of like the way the game's probably supposed to be in the leadership phase, to be honest. And Dark Eldar with that regard too. But outside of that, like, Marines don't really interact with it because they ignore combat attrition mods. So, like, cool, I'm below half strength. That doesn't matter. Chaos Marines interact with it, but their leadership is so high that they really don't interact with it. Same with, like, Custodes. Um, so it's one of those where this is a weird one, and it's very matchup specific. Unit from your army is selected to shoot. Select one enemy unit. Uh, their strat's not bad. You have to get within 12 inches of it. But you can have the move characteristics of models in an enemy unit, and the enemy unit cannot fire Overwatch or set the defense. So that's not bad. Like, it's not great, but it's not bad. One enemy unit within 12 inches. That's okay. Okay, so we're gonna jump to Rizza, because like I said, like, this is, I read this and was just like, I don't understand how people are not playing it. Yeah, that checks out. Why would I do that? Here's my bucket of dice that are gonna do nothing. Um, so Rizza, for those that don't know, Rizza is just Blood Angels, but in admech. And admech, so like I said, like, a lot of people think of admech as a shooting army, but their melee options are pretty good. Like, they're not they're not crazy good, but they're good enough. And in something like Rizza, they become really good. The issue I see with a lot of admech melee is it's really good until it hits an actual melee army, and then you're just like, oh, okay. But this right here, to me, you stack this with their pretty solid melee options, and now you've got some cool stuff going on. And we're gonna show you what I'm talking about here in a second. Boop, boop, boop. All right, so each time a model in this dogma makes a melee attack, if it was charged or performed a heroic intervention, add 1 to the attack's wound roll. Uh, that's really powerful. Um, there's a reason why Blood Angels are, like, some of the winningest Space Marines right now. +1 to wound on the charge or getting charged is really powerful. And what that's going to do is, let's go over to the Castellans, all right? So their Castellan robots, strength 6, right? But their Castellan fist is +4, -3, 3 damage, and it gets an additional attack. So you're rolling 4 attacks. We're not going to worry about weapon skill and all that right now, because there's a lot of weird ways you can buff that in this army. So they're going to be strength 10 +1 to wound on the charge. So there's literally nothing in this game that the Castellans aren't going to wound on 2s. At -3 and 3 damage, like, those things hit hard. And then if you couple that with the crazy amount of buffs that you can do with your warlord traits and your characters and stuff, they can do a lot of damage. All right, so if you've got a unit of 4 of those, you're going to get 16 attacks. You have the potential to be hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s, wounding on 2s, re-rolling 1s. And it's not that hard to do with these. Yes, they have to get there. Their 8-inch movement does keep them slow, and your opponent is probably going to do everything they can to get rid of them. But that's why I think, you need to do things in waves. You have to kind of think about what you're doing. Um, let's see. Boop. So the other part of that, let's go ahead and just move this over. The other part of that is you add 1 to all charge rolls. Um, Adding 1 to charge rolls means if you do have something in Deep Strike, it's only an 8-inch charge instead of a 9-inch charge. And while that's not, you're still going to fail that more often than you're going to make it. If you have a reroll, you're not too far off, you know. I don't know what the exact percentage is, but just guessing off the top of my head, it's somewhere around 40 to 45% success rate, hitting an 8 or higher. So if you have a reroll, you have a pretty good chance of making that 8-inch charge out of Deep Strike. So it's one of those where it's pretty good. The Citation and Savagery is their warlord trait. Select 1 core unit within 6 inches, and then until the start of the next fight phase. At the start of the fight phase, select one core unit within 6 inches until the next fight phase. Each time they make an attack, improve the AP by 1. So you can actually have neg 4 AP Castellans, which is kind of relevant in the Armor of Contempt age, because now you're at least pushing Land Raiders to a 5-up for 3 damage. You know, you're pushing Terminators to invuln or die. You know, so there's a lot of good interaction right there. And the Castellans get core if they've got a Data Smith next to them. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Like, they will have core as long as you have a Data Smith next to them. Well, and it's funny. So we're going to talk about those in a minute, and we're going to talk about the Fulgurite Electro Priests. Um, but yeah, and that's exactly where we're heading with this, my man. The Relic is funny. I wouldn't say it's good, but it's funny. It's only 3 shots, strength 7, neg 2, 2 damage. I would take it just for the memes. Like, I think it's hilarious. Because if you do spike a good hit roll, you could do a lot of damage to something. I just need to see if that's it. Nope, that's not anything. Cool, cool, cool. All right. So it's one of those where I would definitely take it just kind of for the memes. Kind of like when I play orcs. Like, I bring the dead shiny Shuda. It's not necessarily good, but it's hilarious and it's very meme worthy. Plasma specialist. So at first glance, I was like, this strat is amazing. Uh, and it's basically weapons for the Dark Ages. For those that don't know, you just add one to the damage characteristic of a unit's plasma weapon when they make their attacks. So it is really good. But I'm pretty sure there's only 2 units in the whole goddamn codex that have plasma weapons, which is really weird. Now, don't get me wrong, one of them is destroyers, and their plasma gun is nuts. You know, the destroyers get D6 plasma shots, and it's just your standard plasma profile. But if you've got a unit of 5 of them, you know, if you've got, what, 7, 14, 21, you're going to average like somewhere around 18, 19 shots, and you can make them strength 8, neg 3, 3 damage. Like, that's pretty good. And again, they've got the ability to, like, re-roll ones and all kinds of other stuff. There's a lot going on with them. Because they're bikes, they don't have the penalty for moving and shooting heavy weapons. So, but I personally, I don't know that they're worth bringing. Because of this. You know, when you're running Rizza, you want to make sure things have a melee profile. Everything doesn't have to have one, but you want to make sure that a lot of things do. And then, so if we look at the breachers compared to the destroyers, you lose access to the strat because they don't have any plasma. But the heavy arc rifle is really good. It's 2 shots against vehicles. It has a damage characteristic of 3 and auto wounds on a 4+. So again, if we look at Land Raiders, and that's not necessarily like the litmus test that we need to use because you're not going to see a ton of them. But even just let's look at Knights. Knights have a 3-up save. Your neg 2 is going to push them to their 5-up invuln, and it's all just 3 damage against Knights because they have the vehicle keyword. And with a 36-inch range, they're basically going to be able to shoot them. So that's a solid gun profile, and then it'll also just kind of do damage or kill anything else. You know, if your opponent's an orc player, like, Ramshackle becomes less relevant because your weapon characteristics go from 2 to 3, excuse me, and then back down to 2. So it's one of those where you can put a lot of damage onto orc buggies because now they're all 2 damage attacks. It ignores their Ramshackle effectively. I honestly, I think it's a better gun than the torsion cannon simply because you just get a higher volume of fire. And, you know, the torsion cannon has a better damage output, but you have more chances to do damage with the arc rifle, and the arc rifle is a more versatile weapon. You know, you can shoot that into infantry and you're going to smoke infantry, and you can shoot that into vehicles and you're going to do damage into vehicles. You know, you're going to do 2 damage consistently to dreadnoughts that have the duty eternal and stuff like that. So, but then the cool thing that I like about breachers is that they have a melee option, right? Uh, you have the arc claw, which is effectively a power sword profile, and then you get a bonus attack, and then against vehicles, it automatically wounds on a 4+, and then is damage 2. So these guys are strength 5 base. So they go to strength 6 +1 to wound on the charge. So you don't necessarily need that 4+ successfully wounding vehicles, because you're going to be wounding vehicles on 4 anyway. So I'd probably just give them the hydraulic claw. You don't get the bonus attack, but you're right back to strength 10, and you're right back to wounding most things on 2s. I can't, unless it has a special rule that just says no, you're wounding everything on 2. So these things, really good with Rizza. You have a lot of versatility. Like I said, the arc rifle to me is the standout gun for them. Maybe you put a torsion cannon in the unit, but man, for 10 points, I'd just take the 2 shots with the arc rifle, keep the unit cheap. Their movement's not great at 6 inches, but they are able to move through breachable terrain features the way infantry can, which helps them even though they're bikes. And then we're going to go and so we are going to cover the Sakari units in a minute. We're going to jump over to the Fulgurite Electro Priest because this was another standout unit in my head. And that one is because they have some silly interactions as well. They have a 6-up base save, so it's nothing crazy. But if, let's see, they've got the Electro Leech Stave. It's +2, -2, 2 damage, but wound rolls a 6, do 2 mortals, and the attack sequence ends, and they have 2 attacks each. So what you want to do is you're trying to get volume out of there, and I believe there's a +1 attack strat that you can use for them. I'm just double checking that real quick. Maybe not. There is a +1 attack, but it might not be usable on them. So they've got strength 5, -2, 2 damage attacks, right? And as the Jaeger already, will you spell that phonetically for me, my man? You. Oh man, I don't know if that's a compliment or an insult, Dan, but thank you. The voice of an angel and a face for radio. I think you mean the face of an angel and the voice for radio. Yeah, you guys are hilarious. But they're strength 5, -2, 2 damage. They'll get +1 to wound on the charge. So again, you guys are hilarious. You're hilarious. So they're gonna wound most things that they're gonna go into on 3s or 2s. They'll wound vehicles on 4s. You know, that's not a bad interaction. And as mentioned before, you can give things +1 strength. I don't know if they get the canticles because again, I'm still learning a lot of stuff about this army. It's one of those where I just kind of like pick them up every once in a while and read through it, and then I'm like, oh yeah, this is cool, and then I put it down, and then I pick it up and read through it, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is cool. Um, so if they kill a unit, they get to add 1 to their blast ability, and their blast ability is like you roll a d6 after a charge for every model in engagement range, and on a 6, that enemy unit suffers a mortal wound. So it just means they do a mortal on a 5. But they have a 5-up, 5-up, which isn't terrible. Like, it's very Sisters Repentia. That's actually effectively what they are, is just Sisters Repentia. They do get a 4-up invuln after they kill a unit, which is pretty nice. And then, like I said, the weapon itself, wound rolls of 6, do 2 mortals, and the attack sequence ends. So you just want to throw a lot of dice at somebody with them. So I would put a unit of 10 or 12. I don't know how many people the Dune Rider can take. Let's find out. The Scorpius Dune Rider, 12. I would just load 12 up. Gotcha. Okay. So do they get anything, or do they get the other bonus? What's it called? The gosh, it's like the dogma or dogmata. I forget. There is so much in this book. The canticles of every unit. Yeah, so I don't think these guys will get the canticles because they don't have like the canticle keyword, and I think you need to have that. Let's see. Or it's on their data sheet, I think. Like Strands of Fate. Like I think it kind of works like Strands of Fate, like it goes on their data sheet. Yep. So Canticles is a data sheet ability, but it's based off of your detachment. All right, so I would probably slam 12 of those in a Dune Rider to get them up the board as quickly as possible. Rust Stalkers. And then you've got the Sicarian Rust Stalkers, and what are the other ones? There's another Infiltrators. Let's take a look at both of these. Boop. Because I don't know the difference between these two just yet. But I know the Rust Stalkers. I've seen those on the table, so I just instantly remembered them. They're not expensive. 18 points a model for what you get. You get 3 attacks base, 4 for the sergeant, and then they get basically a power sword. And then an unmodified wound roll of 6 is a mortal wound in addition to normal damage. Each time attack. So they can have their razor replaced. Oh, they get a cord claw and a razor. Okay, so you get a cord claw and a razor, or you get the blades. I just take the blades personally. I just go straight to the neg 3 AP. Again, mostly because of Armor of Contempt being a thing. I just don't want to mess with it. And then the +1 strength puts him at strength 5, +1 to wound on the charge. So again, like there's a lot of good things going on there. They can ignore all movement modifiers except for the ones from the Bulwark imperative. And then they can ignore all modifiers, any or all modifiers to advance and charge rolls. So that's really good. What up, Tyler? And they have a 5-up invuln, and then each time a ranged attack is allocated to a model in this unit while it's receiving the benefits of cover, add an additional 1 to the saving throws. So they have a 4-up save, a 5-up invuln, and then they basically have a Cameline cloak, so they can have a 2-up while they're in cover. And for those that don't know, this is actually really important. So this benefits of cover, it does not have to be light cover, is the first thing. So if you're in a woods, you're getting the benefits of dense cover. You still get to add 1 to your save. So you'll be -1 to hit with a 3-up save and a 5-up invuln. And the other thing is it doesn't specify when you get to do it. So simply being in a terrain feature that grants cover effectively means you add 1 to your save all the time. So when you're in melee, if you're in a ruins, you have a 3-up base save. So these are all things to kind of think about, because I know a lot of people don't necessarily realize that interaction. Being in woods, you get a 3-up base save because you don't have to be the cover doesn't have to be relevant. You just have to be receiving it. Is that the Army of Renown? The Skitarii veteran cohort? Gotcha. Uh, and now we're going to look at the infiltrators. So the infiltrators, each time an attack is made against it, if you're outside of 12 inches, you can't re-roll the hit roll and you can't re-roll the wound roll. That's actually really good. And these are, what, 19 points? They're 1 point more. Every model is equipped with a stub carbine and a power sword. And then they can have those replaced with a flechette blaster and a taser goad. So pre-Armor of Contempt, I'd take the taser goad. Because of Armor of Contempt, I take the power sword every time. Um, the taser goad's still good, especially because you can get hit rerolls pretty easily in this army. There's ways to do it. So you can just fish for sixes to score those bonus hits. The flechette pistol's okay. The stub carbine's okay. So there's nothing wrong with either one of them. During deployment, so they have a forward deploy, so they're too expensive, I think, to deploy them in a way that like I would for commandos. Commandos, I would put them up front as a roadblock and just be like, all right, here's my 50-point unit of commandos. If they die, they die. If they don't die, awesome. It is what it is. These are a little bit too expensive to kind of just throw up there as a roadblock. So if you do forward deploy them, you want to do it intelligently. And you'd probably not want to put them. I thought there were some +1 attack ones. I thought there was one where you basically get shock assault. You add one to your attack characteristic if you charged. But I don't know what it's called off the top of my head. Like I said, I'm just kind of diving into this because I'm trying to decide what I'm building this year. I know what I'm playing for events competitively, but I have to decide what army I want to build. And man, like I do love me some Castellans, so that might be the route I go. So they get forward deploy, and then when an enemy is within 3 inches, your -1 leadership is okay. I personally think the Rust Stalkers are maybe better's not the right word, but like if you put the Rust Stalkers in a transport, which I would, you're not losing anything. Whereas if you put these in a transport, they can't forward deploy. So you're kind of like giving up their data sheet ability. And then I feel like the Rust Stalkers have a little bit more staying power, being able to gain the benefits, getting the bonus save against cover. So like this is a very solid unit. There's nothing wrong with it. I think if your style of play is conducive to what they do, they'll do well for you. Um, there were a couple other units I wanted to talk about. Let me look them up real quick. Because one of them was the new dog units, but I don't remember which one. Was it those? I think it was these. Yeah, all right. So, I'm sure. Woof indeed. All right. So, of the two dog units, this is the one that stood out to me the most. And again, it's because of what I'm looking for and what I want to get out of it. Um, the other ones have a melee profile, but it's just clawed limbs. So they're just like strength 4 and 2 additional attacks, which isn't bad. Like it's still 4 attacks, and really it's probably just as good as what I'm going to get out of these because these are only -1, I believe, now. So Armor of Contempt is kind of poopy, but these also still get the clawed limbs. So it's one of those where you at least have the option to have AP into armies that don't have. So everything in here gets a galvanic carbine, cavalry saber, and clawed limbs. The galvanic carbine is cool. I'm sorry, Tyler. Whatever you just said threw me off. You'd click their skull and do that. but that works too. What, this skull right here? Yeah, I can. It was more just I knew what I was looking for and I had it on the app. Uh, so the galvanic carbine, you get 2 shot strength 4 neg 1 AP. And this is again where I'm coming from with the armor of contempt arguably like kind of hurts them because a lot of AP bonuses that they've gotten are just not relevant into about 60% of the game. And it's actually probably more than that when you account for chaos also. It's probably closer to 70, 75% of the game. Um, but I like these guys because A, they're T4, 2 wounds, they move 12 inches, so they have some mobility, which, as we've discussed earlier, admech seems to lack a little bit of. They have a 5-up invuln, and at the start of the first battle round, they can make a normal move, but they can't end this move within 9 inches of enemy models. And each time you select a target for a weapon, oh, okay, that's just the, who's got that? Each time you select a target for a weapon, a model in this unit is equipped with, you can ignore lookout, sir. Oh, okay, so that's just all their guns. That's good. I did not know that. That's good to know. So they've got the galvanic carbine, the cavalry saber clawed limbs, and like I said, the carbine's not bad. 18-inch assault too. So it's got some good, not great range, but it's got okay range. But if you take 5 of them, you get 10 shots, and they are ballistic skill 3, so they are pretty accurate. The Archeo revolver, I think, is an upgrade for your sergeant. Yep, he's just equipped with it. So he'll either get to shoot the revolver or the carbine. You can't shoot both because it's a pistol. The pre-game move I like with these guys. It is a 9-inch pre-game move, but with a 12-inch regular move, they'll have 21 inches of movement if you go first. So it allows you to close a lot of distance. You can try to jam somebody in their in their deployment zone if that's what you wanted to do. And for you, Tyler, I'll come over here. I think it was these. These were the other ones I wanted to look at because, again, I think these are really good. They're on a 40 mil base. Oh, because they're the flight stands. This unit, blah, blah, blah. So they've got talons and a phosphor torch. The talons, again, -1 AP, so not super relevant into anything with armor of contempt. But the phosphor torch isn't bad. They're just a flamer unit. But the nice thing about these guys is that they deep strike inherently, which is not. I don't think there's a ton in this codex that does. There's ways to do it, but I don't think there's a ton of data sheets that do it inherently. They are strength 4, so they're going to be strength 4 +1 to wound with 2 attacks. And then, yep, this is just their deep strike rule here. They have a 5-up invuln, and they can fall back and charge. And they're +1 attack on the charge. They basically have shock assault. So that's why. Yes, agreed. And I like the Raiders, and I think they're cool models. Like that's what drew me to this army when I first got into 40k in 8th edition. I played 3rd, I played 4th, I kind of stopped in 5th, and then didn't come back till 8th. And when I came back, the first army I looked at was admech. My buddy let me borrow one of his armies, and it was an admech army. And it was mostly just the aesthetics. Like, man, this is super cool. I love the way they look. But I always played orcs historically, so when I saw the new orc buggy models, that was just kind of it, man. Like, they got me. Um, the bonus attack's going to be real good for these dudes because they don't hit very hard compared to other things in your army, but it gives you some things that you don't have otherwise. The flamers are going to help you if you run into things like clowns, harlequins. There we go. You hit harlequins, and then the flamers become very relevant because they're strength 4, so you're just wounding harlequins on 3s with a bunch of auto hits. Same with their attacks. Like, it's a lot of dice. You're strength 4. you're gonna be +1 to wound. So like if you hit elves or anything like that, you're gonna be wounding them on 2s. Uh, like this is a unit that's going to be really strong into most Xenos interactions, and where it's going to struggle is if you smack them into power armor, and at that point you're just relying on the flamer portion of it more than anything to just kind of chip wounds off, chip wounds off. They're a little pricey, but they could also just become action monkeys. I think this is an army that could score Knockmund pretty easily if you build for it. The downside is having to build for it because then you're having to take units that you might not normally take. You know, if I were to build admech, I would not be running many Rangers. And that's nothing against Rangers, it's just not where I would want to be. Um, but I'd have to bring 2 5-mans if I wanted to do like an R&D situation. Um, just to kind of from a competitive perspective score points with it. Holy cow. Oh, they're just going ham in the Discord. Okay. Uh, so from a point scoring perspective, Rangers are going to give you probably the most utility. You're probably going to need a couple units if you go the R&D route of these. But we're going to kind of talk secondaries in a little bit here. Let's see, Castellans. I want to jump back to them because the way I would probably load them out is just giving them a single fist and then whatever their base loadout is, which is I think 1 blaster and then 1 heavy blaster and a fist. And I think that's what we do. We just give them six shots, and give them 1 fist because the 1 fist gives them 4 attacks. I don't think giving up 3 shooting attacks is worth gaining 1 melee attack for this unit. Because while the gun's not amazing, it's not bad. I don't remember which one they have to give up for it. I think it's the Castellan blaster. Like they give up the Castellan blaster to gain the Castellan fist. Yep, just look down there. And I don't know giving up 3 shots is worth getting 1 additional attack. I really don't. Because they already get their 1 additional for the base hand. So it's like, cool, I could have 2 hands and get 2 bonus attacks. So I go from 4 attacks to 5 attacks. Is kind of I don't know. I think I'd rather have the extra dice so that they feel more useful while I'm trying to get them somewhere. The Aegis Protocol is where they start, if I remember right. Yeah, okay. Just wanted to make sure it didn't change. So at the start of the game, they just have a 2-up save. And that's really good. It is. And we're going to go over some other things here too. Let's see. Because they have Warlord traits. Boop. Let's just do this because I am not. Oh. All right. So the Warlord traits, there's some pretty neat stuff in here, and they have some really cool interactions. Now that we've kind of touched on some of the data sheets that I really like, we're going to kind of talk some of the Warlord traits, some of the relics, and then we're going to jump over to some secondaries and how we can maybe try to score points with this army. And then we're going to see where we're at with time. If we still have time, I'd like to talk a little bit about some orc knobs, but if we don't have time, we're not going to sweat that. Let's see. So one thing I like is a lot of the Warlord traits are pick a unit within 6 inches or any unit with a what is it? Data tether? Is that what it's called? And that might be the Skitarii Warlord. Yeah, Skitarii Warlord traits. A lot of their Warlord traits have this pick a unit or any data tether unit on the battlefield and do this, which is pretty cool. Like the ability to just be like, I'm gonna give this here. Let's look at these real quick. Tech Priest Warlord traits. I don't remember any of those really. Like, you get a fallback and charge. This just buffs them. First-hand field testing. Yep. Necromechanic. So Necromechanic's not bad. You just auto-heal 3 instead of D3. But I don't know that it's worth... In the in the context of Nephilim, I don't know that it's worth bringing. I don't know that that's worth a command point. And then orbital teleportarium. During deployment, you can set this unit up in orbit instead of being on the battlefield. And that just gives it, you can pick a unit to gain deep strike. And that's picked when you pick the warlord trait. So you can just be like, all right, this is my warlord trait. This one unit now has the ability to deep strike. And again, that one is situationally really good. Giving a unit that can't normally deep strike the ability to deep strike is pretty useful. Again, and it doesn't have to be anything crazy. Even just a unit of Rangers, if we go back to that R&D example, you can just drop a unit of Rangers in a back corner and be like, boom, R&D done. So there's a lot of scoring potential that you can do with that in addition to other things. It's all on just how you want to kind of use it. Uh, and this one is you pick a core unit within 9 inches. They get to reroll hit rolls in the fight phase. So this one's actually, depending on what you're doing, this one's actually really good, especially when you've got like 6s explode, like some taser goads and stuff. Like you can kind of layer that on and just get a lot of spicy dice. Spicy dicey. Skitarii Warlord traits. This is where I was blown away at how good some of these are, because a lot of them are just like pick a core unit within 9 inches or pick any core data tether unit on the board. This one is they can make range attacks without failing. So those are weird, and I don't have anything against them. The melee ones are kind of wild because they're, I'll just pull them up real quick on my phone. The Sidonian Dragoons. Every model is equipped with a Radium Jezzail. So their base loadout is a heavy 2, strength 5, neg 2, 1 damage sniper rifle. But you can replace it with a Taser Lance, which is strength 8, neg 2, 2 damage, hit rolls of 6, score 2 additional hits. And then I believe they can all get a Phosphor Serpenta, which is just a single shot, strength 5, neg 1, 1 damage. And it's actually pretty good. Like these move 10 inches. Strength 8 plus 1 to wound is pretty good. The neg 2 rend is kind of what I think hurts them. Again, because of things like Armor of Contempt. And I know that's not the end all be all for everything, but man, it just it feels so bad, especially as an orc player, to smack into Armor of Contempt and just be like, yeah, all right, dude, like, cool. Uh, you know, obviously the las cannons are really good on the shooty ones. I do like those. Those are good. And in fact, the list, I'll kind of go through the list that I put together initially, and they're in there. Spoiler alert. The Battlesphere uplink is okay. It's one of those where, if you've got a build that needs it, it's good. What I'm looking at and thinking about doing, I don't really need that. Programmed retreat. What is that? You can shoot and fall back. Archived engagements until the start of the command phase if this unit is in engagement range. So this one really stood out to me because you get to pick a unit within 9 or a core data tether unit. If it's in engagement range, it gains fight first. This army has some weird fight first, fight last interactions. They do exist. There's a way to give somebody like a Judiciar style ability. I don't remember if it's a relic or a warlord trait. There's a stratagem that you can use to make an enemy a unit fight last. So there's a lot of I shouldn't say a lot. There's a few interactions in here which will make them if your timing's good and you kind of get you get everything in line the way it should be, you can do a lot of good things with them. Let's see, Firepoint telemetry. So this one's pretty good, and I think this was in the list that I made. It is treated as having the benefits of light cover against the attack. So you could pick a unit within 9 and give them light cover, or you could pick any core data tether unit and give them light cover. and then they get to add an additional one to their armor save if they're infantry and on a terrain feature. So oddly enough, there's no reason this wouldn't stack with like your Rust Stalkers. So now they have the benefits of cover and they get to add 2 to their save, right? So like they'll go to a 1-up save. Like there's some cool interactions in there to be had for sure. And then reroll advance and charge rolls, and that one's pretty good. But I think I took the Firepoint telemetry cache mostly because I again, like I can slap light cover onto my robots. They won't get the additional bonus save, but I can do that. All right, so let's go to relics. Boop. Boop, 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 boop. I guess, man, I've been, yeah, and I did see that, and post Nephilim, it might be worth doing, and even now it might be. I just haven't played enough with it. Like I said, this is just a, oh my gosh, I'm kind of going through this, but there's secondaries, warlord traits, warlord traits. Well, let's go here because I know I wanted to look at these too. So the holy orders are super weird, and I had to read that a couple times to really get it. But it's kind of like what a sisters have. They can do their thing with their characters, so they get a once per game ability, and then they also have other abilities. And this is kind of similar. So when you induct a unit into a holy order, it gains 2 additional abilities based on which order it is inducted into. One is progressive. Progressive abilities. So you get 2 separate progressive abilities. The first one is what you get at the start of the game. The second one takes an action to activate. And basically what it does is it just says, okay, the first part's gone, you only get the second part. So a good, I think this is the one that I was like, this is super good. Yeah. So once per battle. So this is your once per battle on this one. Structural prognosis. And this is, I think, the most expensive one. Yeah. One most expensive one. Once per battle, if this model is on the battlefield, when you use a strategic ploy stratagem, you can reduce this cost by 1 command point. And it's only the one time. So not amazing, not bad. I'd have to look at the stratagems to know like which ones I would want to use that for, because that's one area I haven't like dug into too much. But just knowing that I could potentially just get a free stratagem once per game is pretty nice, especially again in the restricted command points of Nephilim. The initial is in your command phase. If this part is active for this model, select one core unit within 6 inches of this model. Each time an attack with an AP characteristic of 1 or 2 is allocated, it becomes AP 0. So again, going back to like Castellans, they have a 2-up save. All right, I can give them light cover, so now they have a 1-up save, and now I can just be like, and they also just ignore AP1 and AP2. So your AP3 before I even come off my 1-up save. And it doesn't even have to be Castellans. Like this will interact with anything that's core in the army. Uh, so this one's really good. And then the advanced part is until the start of your next command phase, each time a unit in that or a model in that unit makes a ranged attack, the target doesn't receive the benefits of cover against that attack. And that one's okay. I don't know that I would give up ignoring AP1 and AP2 for ignoring the benefits of cover against my opponent when I shoot. Uh, Maybe I guess maybe it depends on what the game looks like. But I think personally, I think the ignoring AP1 and AP2 is just so good. And none of these are bad. Each time hit rolls a 6 auto wound in the fight phase. And then I think this one's a 6 up feel no pain. Yep. So they're real weird too. Yeah, well, all right, let's see. Janitors. Let me see what that one is. We'll go through those in the order here. Oh, so janitors is the one I was just looking at. Yeah, and again, I don't know the stratagems well enough to be able to comment on which one's going to be the most useful for the stratagem portion of it. But the biomechanical aggression is solid, especially again with the ability to kind of like get rerolls. They are there. The 6 up feel no pain is not as good because it only works for the Cataphront servitors or regular servitors. So it's one of those where it's only going to work on destroyers, and it's not terrible. Um, but if you got a unit of destroyers, it allows you to kind of like supercharge with a little bit of reckless abandon, knowing you're at least going to roll a die before you take that mortal wound. Let's look at Magi. Once per battle, and I don't know what any of the epic deed strats are. Uh, Add 2 to advance rolls made for that unit. It's okay. It could be useful in that Army of Renown you said had a advance and charge strat. So like that might be a use for it. The advanced one, each time a model in the unit makes a range. So the advanced one in Magi is actually really good. If you're playing a shooting army, your hit rolls of 6 score an additional hit. Um, Again, like let's take destroyers as a good example. If you've got a unit of 5 destroyers, you're getting 5d6 shots. What's that? That's going to be about 20 shots. If you can give them full hit rolls, which we both know you can, um, that's a lot of dice you get to throw, man. You who cares? Like you can do a lot of damage, and even if you're not supercharging, like it's just like 20 dice. Your hit rolls of 6 explode. You could just fish for those sixes. And that's assuming a roughly average roll on your volume. If you're going into a unit that gives blast, like if you're playing against like a Poxwalker spam list or something similar, where you're just like, all right, here's my 30 shots, it just becomes a little bit different there. Artisans. Fallback, shoot, and charge, but it's -1 to hit. That's pretty solid. It's not like amazing, but yeah, okay, so that's exactly what you said. The second part, each time a model in that unit makes a ranged attack, add 1 to the strength characteristic. Yeah, that's super good. And again, just going back to what we were talking about with like destroyers, or even the almost anything for that matter, like +1 strength, because like you could give your Castellan strength 7 phosphor blasters in, like that gets a little wild. All right, so there were some relics that I had wanted to kind of touch on. See if we can find them real quick. Here we go. No, that is okay. Here we go. Uh, So and I'm not big into the like I'm gonna make my do to smash captain kind of interaction. So I those types of weapons don't stick out to me like the Pater Cogtooth. Like, all right, cool man. He's +3, -2, 3 damage. Like they're not. I don't know. That's not what sticks out to me, especially in an army like admech. Like I want something that's gonna force multiply because that's so much of what they do. Each time the bearer would lose a wound on a 5 up, the wound is not lost. So the raiment is not bad. You get to pick a unit within 3 and ignore all hit roll and ballistic skill modifiers for ranged attacks. Um, that's not terrible. I don't know if it's worth a warlord slot or a relic slot, and it's arguably going to be dependent on how you've got your army build. If you're playing a shooty admech army, that might be worth kind of spending that relic on just to kind of keep your army as efficient as possible. Curiously, this one doesn't say anything about uh, the dogma bonuses. So theoretically, it could ignore the dogma bonuses because, like, if I remember right, the dogma bonus is like you can add one to your weapon skill, but you subtract one to your ballistic skill. So unless that specifically says it can't be ignored, this would theoretically ignore that. But I again would need to look into it more before I could say that definitively because I genuinely don't know this codex well enough to be like, yeah, that's how that works. Uh, so the Tempercopia is okay. It kind of turns one of your characters into a Justiciar, and if you're going to do a melee-centric build, having a pick a unit fight last is a good thing to have. You know, because it can change the outcome of a battle. Like, it can definitely change the outcome of a fight phase. Having played Ynnari for the last few months, where everything fights first, uh, that being able to manipulate the order of initiative in Melee is an extremely powerful ability. This one was pretty good. When a Skitarii core unit within 6 inches of this model each time a unit in that unit makes a melee attack. So I don't know what Skitarii core units consist of yet. Like, I don't know if that's just Rangers. If it is, like, alright, dude. But having your 6s explode in the fight phase is still decent. Uh, this one was kind of neat. I did like this one. The Skull of Elder Nicola. At the end of your shooting phase, roll 1d6 for each enemy vehicle within 12 inches. On a 2 through 3, it suffers 1 mortal wound. On a 4 or 5, it suffers d3. And on a 6, it suffers 3. Um, so that's not a terrible use of a relic. Obviously, it's going to be largely dependent on your opponent having vehicles, and there's going to be just certain armies it's not going to interact with, like demons. But it's not a bad use. Um, it's going to affect dreadnoughts. It's going to affect hellbrutes. It's going to affect forge fiends. It's going to affect buggies. It's going to affect so many things in the game. Uh, it's going to affect riptides and ghost keels. You know, so there's a lot of things that's going to affect. So I feel like, is it the best? No, but is it? I couldn't make a strong argument for it or against it. There was one in here that was just like an auto take. Here it is. Uh, so this relic right here to me just makes a marshal an auto take and makes this relic an auto take for the marshal. Uh, it basically changes his lieutenant rules to being a captain and a lieutenant. So it's like he's a 55-point character, and now he's got a 6-inch bubble of reroll hits and wounds of 1. It just seems like it's just an auto take to me. Again, I don't know why you wouldn't take it because it's just making your army that much more efficient. And like I said, that's how I see admech is your characters should be force multipliers. They shouldn't be torpedoes and beat sticks. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm missing something here, but that's just kind of the interaction I understand. But so we're gonna kind of talk about secondaries for a little bit. And then I'll just do a run through playing a Skitarii army. Exemplar Eternity for Marshall, for Rust Stalkers. Yeah, and I didn't even think about slapping, you know, and you just said that, and I didn't even consider, like, I could just slap these on the Sergeant to give them the fight last interaction. That's actually a good idea. The Techno Martyr, I use Manipulus. Which one's a Techno Martyr? Let's see. Because that might have been one. Oh, yeah, yeah, the one I was just talking about. Awesome. And man, I'm glad that as an AdMech player, like you're telling me these things, and these are just my first glances through the codex. Um, and I'm just like not too far out of line with what like an admech player would see also. So that is good to know. Let's go Nephilim. Here we go. Back up to the top. Secondary objectives. Okay. So what can we score consistently? So obviously anything in purge the enemy is a gamble because it's predicated around your opponent's list. There are some good options here. Uh, into right now, knights are kind of a big thing. So into knights, um, I don't know if bring it down is better or accretion of knowledge. I think it probably depends on the knight build. Like if it's the standard chaos knight build where they're just like, here's my 2 big knights and here's my 14 fucking little knights. Um, I don't think the 14. I don't think the little knights have a wounds characteristic of 14. I think they're 12. What are those things called? Matt, are you still on here? If you are, what are those things called? What are they? What are they? Carnivores are the little one. War dogs. There we go. Yeah, they're 12 wounds. So that's not worth taking unless they have probably 3 to 4 little knights. But even then, you're still just or big knights. But even then, you're just better off taking bring it down. Because they don't stack. Like if I, because it says has one or more of the following criteria. Because it says or more, if I kill you and you have a warlord trait and you have a relic and you're a vehicle, it's still only 3 points. So I feel like this secondary is only situationally good. And I think anytime you would take it, most times you're going to just take bring it down instead. But there are going to be some builds where it's worth taking. Like I said, like there's some orc lists or some anything that's character heavy. Maybe you take if they've got a lot of warlord traits and relics, you know. But like I said, for the most part, it's not worth taking. Like this, it's one of those where this isn't cool because it's cool. Like I'm trying to think of how to word this. It's cool and it's flavorful. And if Bring It Down weren't already a secondary, this would be just fine. But this is literally just worse Bring It Down and worse Assassinate. Um, you know, there are going to be situations where you take that instead of Bring It Down or Assassinate, but there aren't going to be many of them. No Mercy, No Respite. Uh, again, oh, cool. I'm glad you said that because that's the next one I'm looking at here. We looked at these a little bit earlier. At the end of your battle round, score 3 victory points if more enemy units were destroyed by vehicle units from your army than there were vehicle units destroyed. What are the Ballistari units? Let's see what those are. Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, and it doesn't specify fighting, I don't think, right? Nope. So that, yeah. Eradicate, and that's it. Eradication of flesh is good if you build into it. And that was my initial reaction to it. Is it something you're going to take all the time? No. But, like, if you build into it, it's really good. A couple units of Castellans or a couple units of the Iron Striders or the Dragoons, either one. You know, just stuff that's going to be able to kill faster than it dies. So yeah, again, it's not bad, and you just have to build into it, I think, and you have to kind of pace yourself. That's the downside to things like grind and eradication of flesh is that like if you end up killing things too fast, you just rob yourself out of points. And that's a weird interaction in this game. Like, I have no problems with the fact that I can still get tabled and win the game. Like, I actually like that interaction in ninth more than historically. Where it's like, well, if you get tabled and you don't have models on the board, you just lose the game. Well, it's kind of shitty when some armies are literally made to just get tabled, you know? Um, so it's like, I don't have an issue with that. I don't like grind personally, but I could see maybe if you do kill everything and there's literally nothing else to kill, maybe you get 2 victory points at the end of the battle round instead of 3. So that way, if you're playing a hyper elite army and you do end up killing everything turn 3, you still get 4 extra points instead of like robbing yourself out of because you didn't prolong the suffering. There's nothing in warp ritual or warpcraft. Now you could take an inquisitor to open yourself up to warpcraft, and the only thing you really would lose are the points for the inquisitor and the ability to take abhor the witch into like what 2 or 3 armies. And I don't know that that's worth any of it. Like I'd literally have to test run it to see if it's worth it to bring the Inquisitor for psychic interrogation or warp ritual. Um, Abhor the Witch is so good when it's good, but if you don't have it, cool. Like there's no point in it. So I don't know. I think in most situations it's probably worth to open yourself up in an army that struggles to score competitively. I think it's worth it to spend the points to open yourself up to another scoring avenue rather than, saving yourself for the 1 or 2 interactions where you're going to get abhor the witch. Um, that's just my opinion on it. Let me pull up an Inquisitor real quick. Because, like, yeah, 60 points for the base Inquisitor. And, I mean, if you can get 4 psychic interrogations off, you get 12 points. If you get 3 psychic interrogations off, you get 9 points. If you take warp ritual, you got to kind of stay in the center of the board, but you only have to do it 3 times. I don't know what spells they have, so I don't know if any of them are even worth anything. But you're not necessarily taking them for their spells. Um, but Imperium models can also use its leadership instead of their own, so that actually might be another reason to take it, because they're leadership 9. Um, so that's a thing to kind of consider from a competitive standpoint is just take the Inquisitor, open yourself up to 2 more. You shut off the ability to take 1 secondary, but you open up 2 other secondaries. Battlefield Supremacy. Let's see what we got. And this one had 2. Yeah, and I get that it's meta, but man, like, I don't know. I'm all for just like trying to play counter meta. And that's just kind of who I am. Like, I'm just kind of a contrarian at heart. Like, you're going to tell me something's bad, and I'm going to try to figure out how to make it good just so I can prove you wrong and laugh. That's just kind of who I am as a person. Um, and, I think a lot of it is going to shift a little bit now that a lot of the nerfs got lifted. But also, man, if that army of renown can't take it and they're still struggling to score, it might be time to maybe stop worrying about that and then taking the wizard and trying to score some extra points. Um, Again, that's just kind of my opinion on it. And I'm not even saying that they're going to be good, but I don't see a downside in opening up 2 additional avenues to score. Um, all the armies that I play have issues scoring. Like, that's just how it is, man. I'm an orc player, and unless you're building for get the good bits, and even then, it's not a guarantee. Um, you're going to struggle to consistently score a lot of points. And then the other army I play is Yanari, and then I'm segueing into Drukari, and all of those are also just like struggle to score, struggle to score, struggle to score. Yanari does well at tournaments, but there's literally less than 150 people in the nation that play them competitively. So it's one of those where they do well because the people that play them know how to play them and they know how to score with them and stuff. So yeah, it's just kind of maybe it's time to play the counter meta and just test it out. Again, you might play a game and be like, this dude's an idiot and he doesn't know what he's talking about. But I don't see a downside to opening up those scoring avenues. But I also don't know what all the veteran cohort gives you. So without that knowledge, I could be way off the mark. Behind enemy lines. So behind enemy lines is weird. And there's probably ways to build into it with admech, especially with like the Taraxi being able to deep strike. I could swear there was like a did jump teleport relic or warlord trait or something floating around in this codex. Uh, you only need 3 turns of behind enemy lines to really score well with it. If you can get 2 units for 3 straight turns, that's 12 points. And if you can get 1 unit every turn, that's still 10 points. Now, you're probably not getting turn 1 unless you have some sort of the jump mechanic or, like a pre-game move or a forward deploy that lets you scream up the board and get that turn 1 charge in to like kind of make that happen. I thought Lucius had one, but we'll get back to that. I think so. Behind enemy lines, like you're if you take that, you're planning for 3, 4, and 5. If you get more than 3, 4, and 5, awesome. But if you can get 12, good. And I don't think that's a guaranteed secondary. I think that's one you would specifically have to build for. Engage on all fronts, I think, is doable because it's based off the unit's starting strength. So, like, Castellans are pretty beefy in their vehicles, so they always count. Uh, what else? Castellans. There was something else that I was thinking was going to be real good. Oh, the Iron Striders. Um, if you've got a unit of Castellans, a unit of Iron Striders, you've got like some forward deploy units, or you got some pregame movement units. Um, I think you can consistently get 10 points out of that. Again, we're talking about an army that's struggling competitively, so we need to stop thinking of if it's not 15, it's not worth taking. And we need to start thinking if I can get 10 or more points, then it's good. And I need to kind of start there and then kind of tweak what I'm doing. The mindset of if it's not a 100-point game, it's trash, is not something that's going to benefit this army at all. So I think what the best thing to do is just be looking at secondaries, going, can I get 10 points out of this every game? Because if I can get 10 points out of this every game, and I can get 30 points in secondaries, if I can get 40 points in primaries, I've just hit 70 points. You know, and that's kind of where I think as competitive players, unless you're like the best of the best of the best, or you're one of those people who hops armies simply because they just smooth brain 100-point games all day, really that's where we should be striving. Can we get 70 points before paint with this army consistently? Uh, if not, okay, how can I? And I think engage is good for that. Uncharted sequencing, like I said, that one's a gamble because if you go first, I think it's not worth taking. If you could pick it after determining turn order, I would take it every time if I go second. And it's one of those where it is what it is. I feel like in most situations, though, the hidden Archaeo Vault is just going to be a better secondary for you. This one's also at the end of the battle round, but your opponent picks one objective, and if you control it at the end of the battle round, you just get 4 points. Um, again, would be better if you could go second than first, because then your opponent doesn't have a chance to kill you off of it. You can just walk up to it and, take it. And I think that's probably where admech struggle the most, is that these secondaries are worded in this way. Like if it was the end of the turn, I think both of these would be very good. But because it's the end of the battle round, that's one of where these kind of hurt you. And also having I would argue, two, I don't want to say really good, but like 2 decent secondaries in the same category also just hurts them. I feel like Uncharted sequencing is a lot of fun, and I feel like it's worth trying. Um, Just because, man, like, if you can plan it out and you can have a plan going into every game, you're going to be able to get 9 to 12 points on that. Because again, if you get 3 turns, that's 9 points. If you get 4 turns, that's 12 points. I do think Hidden Archaeo Vault is better simply because there's less risk. 3 turns is 12 points for Hidden Archaeo Vault. And there's one objective, it doesn't move. You can just tank that objective for as long as you can. Shadow Ops, with the changes to banners, I think banners is a secondary that benefits admech a lot. Any army that is kind of stagnant or slow moving, banners really helps them because you're going to be slow to get off the objectives. You don't necessarily have to leave them. Armies like Eldar, where if you stand still, you're dead. These Craft Worlds armies, they don't benefit from banners as well because of the fact that, like, they can't stay on the objective. They have to, like, go. They have to move. They have to keep moving. And if they don't keep moving, they're just kind of screwed, you know? And that's just kind of the way they are. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just kind of how they interact with the game. But armies like Death Guard and even Marines, a lot of Marine armies are slow, and these interactions kind of help them. These banners, because it's like I can throw a 5-mana Marines on this objective, and it's going to take a lot more to shift that 5-mana Marines on the objective than it would be if I had a 10-man of Guardian Defenders. Like, you're going to sneeze, and I'm going to pick up Guardian Defenders. You actually have to dedicate something to the Marines to kill them, especially if it's like they've got cover or an apothecary or something. So, and then R&D. So again, R&D, I know a lot of people poo-poo it because it only caps at 12 and blah, 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 blah. But again, when you're playing armies that are struggling to score at the competitive level, take your automatic 12 points. Like, I don't know what else to tell you. Like, just take your automatic 12 points. Especially because they opened it up to infantry or biker units. It is a little bit harder, but if you've got like 2 units of Taraxes, you just bring them in from deep strike, bam, action. Do you lose some shooting with them? Sure. But is it more important that they shoot their flamers, or is it more important that you score some points? You know, um, and with it being infantry or biker, and then all the Cataphrons also just have the biker keyword. And there's a few like action and shoot interactions in the admech codex. You can still, like, I'm going to do R&D and then just still dump my destroyers at you, or I'm going to do R&D and dump my arc rifles at you. So there's still good solid interactions in there. It's just one of those where the game right now, unless you're one of these like top 5 armies, unless you're Tyranids, Harlequins, kind of. But part of the reason Harlequins are so good right now is because of what else is good right now. If you saw like hordes taking over the meta, you would see Harlequins' win percentage tank drastically. So it's one of those where Harlequins are weird because they're a good army and they're a strong army. But part of the reason they're so good and strong right now competitively is because they're just good into what else is dominating right now. But you've got your sisters armies, your Necrons armies, and Necrons, like, that's a bad matchup for Harlequins arguably, just because, like, if they're bringing a lot of warriors, which I don't know. I know a lot of people bring the Silent King and it's a lot of destroyers and stuff, but I know the Silent King is basically like the auto include. But like Necrons, sisters, Tyranids, right now Harlequins, like those 4, like, they're just getting 90 plus points a game for showing up, especially sisters and Necrons. Like, they have secondaries where they don't even have to interact with you and they're just capping most of their secondaries. So unless you're playing those armies, you got to start building for specific secondaries at the competitive level. You got to go into every game with a plan, and it can get stale. Like, don't get me wrong. Playing Yanari for the last few months for me has gotten incredibly boring. Not because it's like, oh, they're so good and I'm winning every game, or they're so bad and I'm losing every game. It's because every game's basically the same for me at this point. Well, I'm going to take Warp Ritual or Psychic Interrogation, and I'm going to take R&D, and then, I have one wild card secondary, and if I score it, awesome. If I don't, awesome. Um, and it just gets a little old knowing that in order to be competitive, you just have to have these specific secondaries. But from a competitive level, like that's kind of what you're going to have to do with admech. You have to kind of go into it going, okay, I can score Nephilim data. I've got the units to do it. I can, or banners. Either one's fine. I can. I brought my Inquisitor, so I can bring Psychic Ritual and or Psychic Interrogation and Warp Ritual, and then I've got like a couple wild card options from there. I can get my 12 points on Warp Rit, I can get my 12 points on Nephilim Data, and if I can get 10 points on another thing, and I can get 40 points in primaries, like I said, I've hit 70, and that's higher than their average scoring right now. So it's one of those where there's play with this army. They just struggle to score, but arguably, like, there's ways to kind of mitigate that by just taking different secondaries and opening up. Are you still going to lose? Yeah. Are they going to just go break the meta and dominate and be like, admech's the best again? No. But they're better than their 40% win rate would indicate. Uh, and there's a few armies like that, you know. Um, you know, Oddly, I think Guard is better than their win rate also indicates. But that's not going to matter anymore anyway because their book is coming out. But yeah, no, I think Guard is a lot better than their win rate indicates. Simply, and I've dug into the stats, and almost every Guard list is the same. And it's one of those where if it's all the same and you're still only winning 30 to 40% of your games, try something different, guys. I can't promise you it's going to work, but if every army's the same and you're going to tournaments and everybody knows that every army's the same, then everybody knows how to plan around what you're doing. Whereas if you can come with some oddball shit, uh, you're going to get a couple wins just because people aren't going to know how to handle it because they're not used to seeing that kind of setup, you know? And that's where, like I said, like the army's better than the win percentage indicates because we're in a meta right now where it's a very copycat meta and everything's just all the same. We went to a tournament in Indianapolis, and it was a ATC style tournament, and there was quite a few teams. I forget how many, but there were 4 Necron players there, 4 different teams, and all 4 lists were effectively the same list. Like there's no variety. So if you end up bringing the variety, you're going to swipe some wins if you know how to use it, simply based off of that. You know, if your only goal is to just win the whole tournament at all costs, then sorry for you. You should probably just play Sisters, Necrons, or Tyranids. But if you just want to go and have fun and you want to kind of play the game and maybe get more wins than you do loses, don't be afraid to think outside the box and start coming with things that people aren't ready for. Because that's actually a more defining characteristic of a good player is the ability to recognize what others are doing and not do it and just go, okay, well, this is what everybody's doing, so this is what they're all going to expect. So I'm going to do this, and this one change is going to help me. So again, like going back to what the Eager said, you know, the Agents of Imperium and Armies of Renown, the veteran cohort is the admech meta today. So if that's the admech meta today, and I know it's the AdMech meta today, and I know that if I go to a tournament, 70 to 80% of all AdMech players are going to be playing it. I can plan for that. And I can go, okay, this is what your army does. I don't have to worry about it because I have the advantage because you're doing what everybody else is doing, and because of that, I know what you're going to do. Whereas if you come with something kind of off the wall, like if you come with that Inquisitor just so you can Warp Ritual or you can Psychic Interrogate, that could potentially throw some people off, you know, because now it's, oh, this guy's just going to score them points. If you hit an army like Custodes, for example, where they don't have wizards either, you're just going to get your 12, 15 points. Like, that's it. There's not much they can do about it outside of just trying to kill your Inquisitor. So it's one of those where just kind of trying to take the time to think outside the box might help you out a little bit. When I looked at the guard stuff, I forget what the numbers were, but if there were 3,000 games, because I just did a big video on statistics, if there's over 3,000 games, well over half of those were just copy paste Cadia lists. And it just, to me, it's like, hey man, if Cadia is going to competitive events and they're still losing, stop playing Cadia. Try something different. Catachan actually had a better win rate than Cadia. And it's just one of those where it's like, it's funny to me because it's like, well, everybody's still just playing Cadia. And I think the custom factions actually had an equivalent win rate to Cadia. And if I had to guess, I know which custom regiments people were taking in those interactions. But man, we've been at it for about 2 hours. I think that's where we're going to stop for today. I definitely talked a lot more about admech than I thought I would. But I just wanted to say thanks again for the follows and the views. You guys have been awesome. I also did get a hold of the winner of the Combat Patrol. I'll be announcing his name next week. As soon as it comes in, I'm going to announce it so that I can ship it out to him. So, again, really appreciate it. We're getting there, guys. We're growing. And it's all because of all of you. So thanks again. If you want to further support me, we do have a Teespring store. It's teespring.com / I think it's still Vorpal Gaming because I don't think I could change the URL on that one. And then obviously I've got my YouTube channel where I do a lot of videos and stuff there too. So this will go on the YouTube channel. Thanks a lot. You guys have a good one.